doesn't just take out your niece. The guy goes after your livelihood and the livelihood of anybody you ever met. You scared? You suicidal? Only in the morning. Now what? Now comes the...
The question was, would anyone detect that we were sane? The answer was, no. No one ever did.
The controversy regarding the myth of mental illness and psychiatry is not about science or medicine, it's about power.
And they ruled out a mental health plan, and they said that the average American did not have the internal fortitude to endure a disaster, and so we were all being unofficially declared as mentally ill, needing the help of the health professionals, and we were not of sound mind.
Hello, it's July 2025. Now, since around the mid-2000s, I've been discussing and exposing the liberal arts, theoretical pseudoscience of psychology in depth. And this is really founded on first-hand knowledge of this particular topic and the so-called fake doctors, the quacks, who allegedly practice this pseudoscience. And I've supported this with independent evidence supporting the first-hand knowledge. And over the years since, doing extensive research into this topic, as well as studying the topic formally and even working within the mental health industry, really expanded my knowledge on this topic, and to see how it really negatively impacts people's lives. Now, I want to be approaching this video from a slightly different angle to try to put everything into perspective. Now, I'm going to be tying this in with tyranny. Now, around 2020, there was a person that was being interviewed, and I've highlighted this with the audio and videos around that time, how they were saying governments around the world were deeming their people, their population, their citizens, whatever, as mentally ill, mentally incapable of making any informed conclusions about any alleged treatments that were being introduced at the time. Now, I'm not going to be discussing that, but it does tie in here. So you have a government, even in North America, deeming the population as mentally ill. Now, how this ties in with tyranny, for example, well, I'm going to back up a little bit before I really expand into the tyranny part of it all. Now, when you go back, for example, to a time in history that we're told anyway, how they were doing these inquisitions, and they had their officials at that time, which were usually religious based, deeming people as witches and warlocks and everything else. And I've highlighted this in overlays over the years as well. And basically, not basically, they were giving death sentences to these people, which was more of a message to others to conform, because it created fear. And these so-called officials at that time were no better and did the same thing as, for example, these people practicing the liberal arts, theoretical pseudoscience of psychology today. And if you go back even in history, when you have all these gurus and whomever profits, anything. Imagine those people today. They would be locked up in some BS psych ward for life because they're enlightened or what have you, because they didn't go along with the status quo that was being imposed socially or anything. Now, when you look at how much power this industry has, the mental health industry, and how they can destroy individuals' lives, and I've highlighted how this topic is used as a weapon to destroy people individually on many different levels. Even socially, we hear, for example, during conversations in a group, whether you're online or even in person, how if someone says something, whether it be truthful or not, or just merely sharing an opinion, whatever, somebody might disagree and say, oh, you're crazy. Because that's the easiest way to discredit them and justify why no one should listen to them, especially the person making the allegation, a false allegation. So people use that as a weapon all the time. It's being used as a weapon, dare I say, politically. Now, when you have governments in control, for example, in Canada, you have free health care. So you have, I'm not going to even get into that nonsense, but just bear with me as I'm trying to make a point here. There's no limit to this insurance, for example, provincial insurance, when somebody's going to see a doctor. Now, here's where the danger is. I want to contrast this, for example, with the United States. When there's no limit, and say somebody's taken against their will based on a false allegation, whether it be by an individual, to authority types, or by these liberal arts, theoretical pseudoscience of psychology, so-called practitioners, and they're saying, yep, this person's crazy, they can be locked in some sort of BS psych ward basically indefinitely. People can even go into these places thinking that maybe they need some help, and because there's no cap on the insurance that's covering it, then yeah, we'll just keep them in forever. And I've talked about even people who have gotten better on their own, which is always the case for those who do. They try to bring them back in because it's all about numbers and funding and everything else, and it's a billion-dollar industry. And I've highlighted, for example, how this industry uses experimental drugs and even so-called physical experiments on people every day, and yet no one blinks an eye to it. They're more concerned with some other nonsense that's being introduced to the world and forced upon people, or allegedly forced upon people, but no one really cares about what's really going on. So if you have a government that's giving you, for example, free health care, allegedly, and that's another deep topic to blow apart, but whatever, and they want you, for example, silenced, or even the population to comply, there's no limit to how long someone's going to be trapped in that system. Now let's contrast with the United States, where you have private health care and you have private insurance, and there's a limit. For example, with so-called psychiatric nonsense, they might say, I don't know, $50,000 is a limit, and they'll keep someone in until that insurance runs out, and then they kick them out. All of a sudden, they're healed. Oh wow, some overnight. Or if they know it's going to be running out, they'll stage it. That's, yeah, see, yeah, we helped. And some people actually buy into the fact that these quacks help people and give them credit. But anyway, I digress. So I just really want to highlight how a government that is offering so-called free health care can use that against individuals and a population. And again, around 2020, there was an interview of a person who was saying how governments all around the world were deeming their population as mentally ill and not being able to make informed conclusions on any alleged medical treatments that were being or trying to be imposed. And that's a whole different topic around the events that began in 2020. A lot of people say that they were forced, they didn't want to, and I've addressed that no one was forced. Just because you don't like the alternatives doesn't mean there are no choices. Anyway, I digress there again. So I just really want to bring this into like trying to put this in perspective. Tyranny coming from a tool of the liberal arts, pseudoscience of psychology, and these quacks who think that they're doctors, who probably couldn't be real doctors, so they went for the next best thing or whatever, who knows. And really, when you study to any reasonable degree this nonsense, you really start to see how much BS it is, because that's all it is BS. There's no right or wrong answer. As long as you give what appears to be an intelligent answer, you're going to pass tests and exams and move on. So hopefully you've got something from this. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
And this person is starting to picture how it could have happened. And what could have been turns into what would have been, turns into what was.
So by the third interview, the memory has taken hold.
The most important thing that you can do to make sure that you don't get sent to the psychiatric hospital on involuntary detention is to make sure a family member comes along with you. This is good for all sorts of reasons. So you want to have a parent come by, your spouse, a sibling, all of that's great. Friend is okay as well, but it's less good.
You suicidal? Only in the morning.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, when is it going to get easier? When you die.